Welcome to this explainer. Look, if you're leading a team or really any kind of organization, you already know that managing change is, well, it's easily one of the hardest things you'll ever do. Today, we're diving into a genuinely fascinating piece of research that takes some pretty dense academic theory and actually turns it into a highly practical toolkit that we can use right now. Let's get into it. So here's the core problem, right? Change initiatives fail all the time, literally all the time. But usually it isn't actually the business plan that's flawed. It's how the leadership executes it. We tend to think of leadership as this static personality trait, like you either have it or you don't. But what if we've been looking at it all wrong? What if effective change leadership is actually just about picking the exact right tool for the specific stage of the process you're currently in?
Okay, so here is our roadmap for today. We're going to look at the Change Management Challenge, examine the ultimate stress test, define our leadership toolkit, walk through Cotter's framework, match style to stage, and wrap the whole thing up with leadership as practice.
Starting off with part 1, the Change Management Challenge. Moving right along to part 2, the ultimate stress test. Now, to see what actually works in the real world, researchers didn't just look at some comfortable tech company in a booming economy. No, they went straight to the trenches. They surveyed 385 employees from small and medium enterprises across all 5 provinces of Lebanon. And this sample size is statistically significant, so it gives us a really robust look at how employees actually view the tactics their leaders employed during massive transformations. And the context here is absolutely mind-blowing. These businesses were navigating an unprecedented economic collapse. We're talking a currency devaluation of over 98%. Throw in a global pandemic on top of that, and change isn't just some corporate buzzword anymore. It is literal survival. I mean, if a leadership tactic works in this environment, it is road-tested for virtually any challenge you're going to face. And that is exactly what makes our source today so rigorous. We're looking at a peer-reviewed empirical study from the journal Sustainability. They use some incredibly complex data analysis to prove exactly which leadership behaviors actually guarantee sustainable change. So let's build our toolbox in part 3, defining the leadership toolkit. Okay, tool number 1 is transformational leadership. Think of these leaders as the visionaries. They don't just, hand out tasks. They really inspire their teams. They challenge them to think differently, and they genuinely care about individual growth. They're using inspirational motivation to build up team spirit and foster creativity. It's really about painting that big picture. Tool number 2 is transactional leadership. Now, this is your operational toolkit. It relies heavily on contingent rewards. Basically, you hit the target, you get the bonus. It also uses something called active management by exception, which is honestly just a fancy way of saying the leader monitors performance and steps in the absolute second things go off track. So to kind of compare the two side by side, transformational leadership is all about painting a picture of the future and inspiring people to get there creatively. Transactional leadership, on the other hand, is the nuts and bolts of compliance, rewards, and keeping the operational train firmly on its tracks. Both of these are fantastic tools, but the real question is, when do you use which? That brings us to part 4, Cotter's 8-step framework. To put these tools to the test, the researchers actually mapped them against John Cotter's famous 8-stage change model. If you're not familiar, this tracks the entire life cycle of an organizational pivot. It starts right at the beginning with creating a sense of urgency, moves through building coalitions and communicating the vision, and goes all the way to anchoring those brand new habits deep into the corporate culture. And now for the really good stuff. Part 5, matching style to stage. Guys, here is where the data gets incredibly fascinating. In the early stages, so building urgency, forming a powerful coalition, and creating a vision, transformational leadership is absolutely vital. You have to inspire people. Conversely, the data shows that relying on transactional, financial rewards here has literally zero impact. It doesn't work. You simply cannot buy intrinsic belief. Now, as we move into the middle stages, communicating that vision and removing obstacles, you still definitely need that transformational inspiration. But notice the shift here. This is exactly where that transactional tool of actively monitoring tasks becomes highly effective to keep execution on track. It ensures standards are met while still allowing for some flexibility. But then we see a massive pivot in the data. When you reach the final stages, securing those short-term wins, building on the change, and anchoring the new culture, transactional leadership suddenly spikes in importance. You absolutely have to visibly reward the new behaviors you want to keep. The data proves, without a doubt, that contingent rewards are absolutely essential to reinforce this new normal.
So, while the underlying math from the study is frankly incredibly complex, the main takeaway is beautifully clean. Transformational leadership acts as your foundation throughout the entire process. But transactional leadership, that is a highly targeted tactical tool that must be deployed specifically at the end to monitor execution and really lock in that new culture. Which brings us to our final takeaway in part 6, leadership as practice. So all this data points to a concept called leadership as practice. What this proves is that effective leadership isn't just some innate personality trait you're randomly born with. It's an enacted process. It's entirely about what you actually do in your day-to-day interactions and how you dynamically respond to your environment. Instead of being locked into just one persona, leadership is a dynamic toolkit. You adapt your behavior based entirely on what the current stage of change demands. If the data shows your team is in stage 1, creating urgency, well, you pull out your transformational tools. If you're in stage 6, generating short-term wins, you pull out your transactional reward tools. It is an ongoing, highly context-dependent practice. So I'll leave you with this to think about. Think about the biggest pivot your team is facing right now. Are you relying on a default leadership style just because, well, it's comfortable? The next time you face a massive challenge, are you going to stubbornly use a hammer to drive a screw? Or will you read the room, identify the exact stage of change you're in, and pick the precise data-backed tool for the job? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you next time.